The Grateful Dead changed their name once, in the fall of 1965, and kept it for 30 years. The live show never showed that kind of restraint. May 5th, 1965, Magoo's Pizza Parlor, Menlo Park, California. It was the first documented public performance by a group called the Warlocks. A naming conflict with another band eventually forced them to change it. By December 4th, at a Ken Kesey acid test in San Jose, they were playing under the name that stuck, the Grateful Dead. That night set the pattern for everything that followed. The band wasn't booked to play a normal set. Some nights, they didn't play one at all. They reacted to the room instead of trying to control it. That idea, the show as an environment rather than a fixed performance, never left them. This was a psychedelic rock band that acted like it was building a ritual, not a set list. On stage, the center of gravity early on was Ron Pigpen McKernan, not Jerry Garcia. Pigpen brought blues authority, harmonica, organ, and a showman's instinct that could stretch Turn On Your Love Light into a 15-minute exercise in crowd control. In those years, the live show ran on his ability to hold a room. It didn't yet run on collective improvisation. That would change within a few years. But in 1966 and 1967, Pigpen was the show. By 1967, the band had moved to Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco at the center of a counterculture tailor-made for a jam band that refused to play the same show twice. By 1969, the chaos had found a structure. Live Dead did something almost no one had done before. It treated a single sprawling live improvisation, 23 minutes of Dark Star, as the finished album, not a bootleg, not a bonus disc, the actual release. Robert Hunter, the band's primary lyricist since 1967, wrote the words they improvised around, lines that could expand or contract depending on where Garcia wanted to take the song that night. 4 years after a pizza parlor in Menlo Park, the live performance itself had become the band's primary artistic statement. The record executives wanted a studio album. The band gave them a concert. After Live Dead, the band pulled back hard. Working Man's Dead and American Beauty traded sprawling psychedelic jams for tight, country and folk-inflected songs you could actually sing along to. That sounds like a retreat. On stage, it wasn't. The tighter songs became launch pads instead of endpoints. They became places to leave from and return to. That took a different kind of skill than the open-ended sound of 1967. Hunter's lyrics gave the songs their structure, specific enough to stand on their own, but open enough to become frameworks. The band also split its live shows into 2 parts, an acoustic set followed by an electric one, doubling the range of a single show without adding a second night. Then, the rhythm section changed shape, and it wasn't by design. Mickey Hart's father, Lenny Hart, had taken over as the band's manager. He was later accused of misusing a significant amount of the band's money. The fallout pushed Mickey Hart out of the band in February of 1971. For the next 3 years, the Grateful Dead performed as a single-drummer band, with Bill Kreutzmann alone behind the kit. The sound became leaner, not because anyone had chosen leanness as an aesthetic, but because a financial betrayal had forced it. Keith Godchaux joined on piano in October of 1971. Donna-Jean Godchaux followed on vocals in 1972. Both changes reshaped the sound of the live show from night to night. Keith added a melodic voice on keyboards. Donna added a second lead vocalist to a band that had mostly relied on Garcia and Weir trading lines. All of it came together during the spring 1972 tour of Europe, 22 shows, the most mythologized run of the band's early years. It was also Pigpen's last major tour. His health was failing, and he would play his final show with the band later that year. The live album drawn from the tour, Europe 72, captured a genuinely fluid, single-drummer ensemble at its peak. But it wasn't a pure document. Vocals and other elements were overdubbed back in the studio. The tour was real. The record of the tour was partly constructed after the fact. That tells you something about how quickly the band's live history began turning into myth, even while it was still happening. By 1973, the band's ambition for live sound had outgrown every public address system built before it. So, they built their own. That ambition went back to Owsley Stanley, who had been constructing custom sound systems for the band since the acid test days. His obsession with pure, undistorted reproduction had never fully left the operation. The result was the wall of sound. It stood behind the musicians instead of in front of them. Roughly 600 speakers fed dedicated channels for nearly every voice and instrument on stage. Each player heard exactly what the audience heard in real time, with almost none of the delay or mismatch that normally separates a musician's monitor mix from the house mix. Moving it required 4 semi-trailers, approximately 20 crew members, and around 8 hours of assembly for a single show. It also nearly broke the band financially. A system that size doesn't scale down for a Tuesday night club date. It commits you to certain venues, certain crews, and certain costs, whether or not the tour is profitable that month. At the same time, Grateful Dead Records and Round Records, the labels the band launched to escape its contract with Warner Brothers, ran into the same problem in a different form. Creative control didn't solve distribution, it didn't solve cash flow, and it didn't solve basic label organization. Independence turned out to be its own kind of expense. By late 1974, something had to give. The band began a formal touring hiatus, its first extended break since 1965. When the members returned in 1976, they came back smaller. There was no more wall of sound. They used a scaled-down live system, introduced new material from Blues for Allah, and rebuilt the show around what the band could sustain, not merely what it could dream up. The smaller post-hiatus band found a new kind of peak, not in scale, but in precision. The spring 1977 tour and the May 8th performance at Cornell University's Barton Hall in particular gave fans the recording many of them point to when arguing about the band's greatest year. The show was preserved in exceptional quality by recording engineer Betty Cantor Jackson. 2 years later, in 1979, Brent Midland joined on keyboards. He brought a Hammond organ and strong vocal harmonies, changing the texture of the live sound for the next decade. The live show also began changing on the audience side. In October of 1984, the band established an official tapers section at a Berkeley concert, formalizing what had been an unofficial but tolerated practice for years. That single policy shift meant a Grateful Dead concert was now deliberately designed to be captured and carried out of the room. No other major touring act of that scale had done that. Then, on July 10, 1986, Garcia entered a diabetic coma that lasted several days. He returned that December, but by his own account and the accounts of others, he'd lost fluency with the guitar and had to rebuild parts of his playing almost from scratch. What happened next had nothing to do with nostalgia. The 1987 studio release Touch of Grey received heavy rotation on MTV. In the Dark became the band's biggest-selling album, and a mostly countercultural touring circuit suddenly found itself with a mainstream hit, pulling in a wave of new fans who'd never seen a Grateful Dead show before. The size of the room changed. From 1988 through 1990, the band regularly played stadiums. Musicians like Branford Marsalis sat in as guests. The band used multimedia systems that would have been unrecognizable to the crew hauling equipment into Magoo's Pizza Parlor in 1965. Then, in July of 1990, Brent Midland died of a drug overdose. A decade-long sound ended almost overnight, just as the band's live audience had grown larger than ever. By the middle of the 1990s, the shows themselves had grown into something the band could no longer fully control. The crowds were bigger than ever. Garcia had spent the previous several years playing through a MIDI system, a setup that converted his guitar signal into digital instructions capable of triggering sounds from a synthesizer rather than relying only on the guitar's amplifier. That started in 1989 when he pulled an old guitar out of retirement specifically to test the system, mostly during the free improvisation section known as Space. By 1990, the technology had been built into his main instrument. Weir and Lesh had moved to MIDI-equipped gear as well. A single guitar note could now come out sounding like a horn, a marimba, or something with no acoustic equivalent at all, live on stage every night. Outside the venues, a different problem was building. Counterfeit tickets, gate crashing, and a fan culture that had outgrown the informal trust on which the band's entire touring system had been built. On July 2, 1995, ticketless fans broke through the perimeter fence at Deer Creek. The following night's show was canceled. The band issued an open letter warning that the culture surrounding its concerts could destroy itself. It wasn't simply one bad crowd, it was 30 years of growth, finally overwhelming the systems built to contain it. 1 week later, on July 9, 1995, the Grateful Dead played their final concert at Soldier Field in Chicago. Nobody in the building knew for certain that night that it'd be the last one. Garcia died on August 9, 1995, exactly 1 month after the band's final show. The surviving members didn't formally announce the end until December. For several months, nobody had actually said out loud that the live show was over, except it wasn't. Not entirely. It simply stopped happening in rooms and started happening somewhere else. The archival release series that became Dick's Picks had already begun in 1993. While the band was still touring, after 1995, it expanded rapidly. In 2005, access to the recordings on the Internet Archive was restricted. The fan community pushed back hard enough that a compromise followed. Audience recordings remained downloadable, while official soundboard recordings became available only for streaming. In 2011, the Library of Congress added the May 8, 1977 Cornell recording to the National Recording Registry. A tape that began in bootleg circulation ended up in a federal preservation vault. By December of 2025, the band was credited with 66 top 40 albums on the Billboard 200, almost entirely through archival releases. That was more than any act in the chart's history. None of those songs had been written after 1995. The band simply kept having hit albums anyway. In April of 2026, the 60-year loop closed all the way. A service called Play Dead launched. It was an app-based streaming vault that placed hundreds of dated performances behind a subscription with regular editions promised. Homemade cassette trading, rebuilt as a platform 40 years later. The two men who might have had the clearest say in any of this, Phil Lesh and Bob Weir, aren't here to weigh in anymore. Lesh died in October of 2024. Weir died in January of this year. The band changed its name once in 1965, and then never changed it again. Now its story is told entirely through the archive it left behind. The live show still hasn't learned to sit still. It just doesn't need a stage anymore.